Hi folks, Bob O'Connor here with a little Christmas story. I got to thinking this week back at a time in which my wife and I were living in Phoenix, Arizona. I was there for a year at graduate school at Arizona State University. And of course, along came December and Christmas. And we didn't have a whole lot of money at this time, and so purchasing a Christmas tree was out of the question because they had to import these from northern Arizona, and they were very expensive. And so we found a branch that had fallen off a tree, and my wife painted it gold, and we hung a few ornaments on it, and that was our Christmas tree. And some friends that we had met out there invited us over for Christmas dinner. And after dinner, the children of the family decided they'd take their new bikes out for a ride. So we went out for a walk and watched the kids ride the bikes. And it was, 65 degrees, beautiful sunny day, palm trees out there. And in Tempe, which was a suburb we're living in, they did have these little angels connected to the palm trees along the streets. And I thought, wow, this is a crazy way to celebrate Christmas. No snow, no green trees, that sort of thing. The white Christmas was obviously out of the picture. And then it dawned on me that the original Christmas took place in exactly this kind of environment. It was a dry, desert-like area with palm trees. And so for the once time in my life, I actually celebrated Christmas in the environment in which it took place. And so I got to thinking, where did all these traditions come from? Santa Claus, reindeer, Christmas trees, and so forth. So I did a little research, and here is a very brief history of Christmas. The ancients celebrated the winter solstice. And we see that native peoples all over the world did this. And in Ireland, 3,000 years BC, at the site of New Grange, the people there built this huge structure. It's 400 or 500 feet in diameter, and it was designed so that when the winter solstice occurs, light would flow down a hallway to a particular chamber, and its use is still unknown, but I think they believe that people were cremated in that chamber. So we can see that the ancient people had a lot to do with this winter solstice. And for many of the people, it was the coming of the light. In other words, that they'd gone through the period of time in which it got darker and darker and darker throughout the days, and this was the shortest day of the year, but it also was the day that marked in which the sun in their eyes would return and the days would get longer, and so they would celebrate this. The Romans, in fact, the early Christians, if I step back a bit, as far as we know, did not celebrate Christmas, because in their culture, you celebrated the death of a famous person and not the birth. And so there wasn't, as far as we know, any big celebrations of Christmas in the early Christian church. However, when the Christian church became the official state religion of the Roman Empire, they started to fuse the Christian celebrations and beliefs with the old pagan beliefs that the Romans had. And so basically the Romans celebrated the winter solstice with the feast of Saturnalia. And Saturn was the god of agriculture. And so what they were doing is celebrating the coming growing season. And Saturnalia was quite a wild affair. There was a lot of celebrating and eating and feasting and drinking and dancing. And they also did have the tradition of the exchange of gifts. In other words, in most cases, they would give gifts to each other. So that was one of the affairs there. Well, the emperor decided that he was going to bring together the Christian celebration and the Saturnalia. And so he took and said, we're going to celebrate the birth of Christ on the same days we have Saturnalia, and we'll kind of combine some of the things that happened. Now, as far as we can tell, Christ was not born during the winter time in that part of the world. In reference to the fact that the shepherds were out with their sheep, and they said in that area in the wintertime, they're not out in the pastures. So some people believe that Jesus was born in the fall and others the spring. So conveniently, they moved the date of the birth of Christ into December, and it became December 25th, very close to Saturnalia. And so they brought the two together, and it was interesting because Saturnalia was celebrating the coming of the new sun, the new light, and of course Christians, you've often heard the phrase, they've seen the light. In other words, they've seen the message that Jesus brought with him. And it was renewal. It was a celebration of the renewal of life. And of course, one of the Christian beliefs is the resurrection of the dead. And so it fit rather nicely as it came along in there. And so we finally get to the point where the birth of Christ comes into the Christmas celebration. And now, what about Christmas trees? Well, that turns out that the Druids had a traditions of bringing evergreens into their houses. They had respect for evergreens that would stay green throughout the year. And so for them, it was a symbol of the fact that life would continue on after, in terms of plants and agriculture, after the deadness of winter. So we begin to see, again, some parallel between the Druid bringing in of evergreens and the Christian belief in rebirth. And so they had the Christmas tree. Now, where did the lights on Christmas tree come from? Well, they say that Martin Luther, as he was walking back from his church, and he was thinking about a sermon, he looked up and was really mesmerized by the beauty of the stars. And so when he got home, the Christmas tree was up, and he attached candles to the Christmas tree to represent the stars. And so that was the coming of the Christmas tree. Now, in this country, the Puritans saw this wild celebration, not wild, but the celebration of Christmas with feasting and exchange of presents as pagan. And the Massachusetts legislature actually passed a law making the celebration of Christmas a crime. However, very soon there was a large influx of immigrants, and they came first from Germany and then from Ireland particularly. And in fact, more people can trace their ancestors back to an ethnic group of Germans. They're still the most populous immigrant group in this country, despite the fact that the Irish think they are. So anyway, they came in and brought the celebrations of Christmas with them, and pretty soon people preferred their way of celebrating Christmas than the old puritanical way of doing it. How about Santa Claus? Well, there are several explanations. They say the Dutch immigrants coming into this country brought Sinterklaas, who gave gifts to the poor. Then there was the tradition of Bishop Nicholas, who was a wealthy man and very generous, and during the Christmas season he would give gifts to poor children. Now, what about some of the idea of Santa Claus and the North Pole and coming down chimneys and having reindeer. And that basically came about primarily from the poem The Night Before Christmas by Clement Clark Moore. And so he gave us the idea of elves and reindeer and that sort of thing. But what about Santa in his white fur trimmed red outfit? And that is given the credit there goes to Thomas Nast. In 1860, he did the covers for Harper's Magazine, and that was the first time we saw Santa Claus pictured as we see him today. So we see that as we celebrate the birth of Christ in our present day, that it's an evolutionary process, and it incorporated many cultures throughout the world and brought together their outlook and their beliefs and so forth, and it really worked out quite well in that today we celebrate Christmas. The Romans said the return of the Son, the S-O-N, and as Christians we're looking forward to the return of the Son, S-O-N, and the idea that Christ's coming is a rebirth for all of us, again, fits in nicely with some of the old traditions that were brought into Christmas. And so I think looking this over, it certainly doesn't diminish the celebration of the birth of Christ. I think in many ways it enriches it. And so with that short explanation, I'll close by wishing you all a very happy and spiritual Christmas and a prosperous New Year. Bob O'Connor for Channel 2. Have a good holiday.